Hello, Hecate devotees, witches, and fellow occultists alike out there. Today's video is about Hecate and her role with ghosts. The music in the background is Paleo Wolf. I listen to them often during ritual. I figured I'd give you something a little extra to listen to besides just my meandering. Let's talk about spirits. There are different types of spirits, and according to different cultures, you can have physical spirits where they come back pretty much as a corpse and haunt you. You can physically touch them, and they either look over the family or can be destructive. You have vapor-like entities that the Greeks believe in, where you're almost a mist-like quality. You're ethereal being. You're see-through, but you look like you would while you were alive. And sometimes you even carry attributes of your death. For example, if you were murdered, you would have the wound visible in your vapor-like being. There's phantoms that are a mix of both, where you are the vapor-like being, but instead of passing through walls and not being able to physically touch you, they would be able to physically touch you or move objects. So there are different types of spirits depending upon which culture you're going with. Today we're going to talk about the Greek kind, where they're translucent but look like their physical being before death. In Greek funerals, they would lay the body out and have a feast in their honor. The corpse would be physically present, and they would peridipnon is what they would call it, is the afterlife feast, where they would honor you and drink to your spirit to move it on into a happier, festive-like environment, so you're no longer attached to that family and to the earthly plane. And they would have a procession. The women would beat at their chests, sometimes wear the clothes of the dead, the person that they're honoring, pull at their hair, scream, moan, and they would carry the body after 30 days of the body resting in the home. They'd carry it in this procession and bury it in a tomb that would have an epitaph of the person who is deceased. And then there they would continue to honor the dead. And the 3rd, the 9th, and 30 days after the deceased, they would come back to that grave site and offer food or libations. They would offer an animal sacrifice sometimes, depending upon how wealthy the family was. Sometimes they'd even offer their own blood. For example, one of the female family members might cut herself and give that offering to the dead, the deceased relative. And they would continue throughout the year, at least 3 times, to honor the dead by giving them feasts and libations and sacrifices. Fortunately for us, we don't do sacrifices anymore, but back then they would choose a black animal. Either a bull, a black bull, a black goat, and sometimes, unfortunately, black dogs were sacrificed. All of these animals are sacred to Hecate. Again, we don't do sacrifices anymore, thank the gods, but these are all considered sacred animals to Hecate. And I mention that because they all did sacrifices to her with these 3 animals. They have to do with funerals, they have to do with her. So that's what they do for their funeral rites. And we can even see parts of these things contributed to necromancy. In Homer's Odyssey, he wrote about necromancy. Now, necromancy is raising the dead, either by ancestor worship, by trying to get a spirit to attack a person or family or place, by having a spirit haunt a place. Like, let's say you love that house, but you don't want anybody else to have it. They'd send a spirit in of their ancestor to keep watch over it, to make sure nobody else who is unworthy would inhabit it. They would also, parts of the necromancy, as I mentioned, the sacrifice part. But like the funeral, in Homer's Odyssey, they mention wearing the garments of the dead to connect your physical being with the deceased to help raise them. Your own blood sacrifice, they mention that in the Odyssey to tie your lineage with what you're doing spiritually. They also mention, of course, the sacred plants to Hecate, but they use them for hallucinogenic properties like belladonna and henbane. These are also linked to her because they're poisonous. They could kill you or make you very sick. But again, I mentioned their hallucinogenic properties, which would make you see all sorts of things, including spirits, and put you on the precipice between life and death. Tura, henbane, belladonna, mushrooms even. They would also leave with the necromancy, they would offer libations of honey and milk, wheat, mushrooms, garlic, and the poisonous plants that I mentioned. So talking about necromancy and Hecate, I would be considered necromantic because I use her to communicate with my ancestors. When you do this, you're not only benefiting your own household, such as your progeny, your children, get better spiritual blessings, but it's helping your own personal self relieve from pain and sadness that might have been linked with your family. Like you couldn't say goodbye to somebody, or you had unfinished business with them. You can have Hecate as an intermediary aspect to help you communicate with them. Hecate is queen of the crossroads. This is because of direction. She not only monitors the Catonia, Enolia, and Urania, which is the earth, the sea, and the sky, but she, at the crossroads, when you're trying to make a decision as to which way to go, she can help favor that because she's Enoria. She is the traveler of in-between places. So, also at the crossroads, they would leave offerings to her for decision-making, for good travel. At this time, the poor would usually come and eat it. Shakespeare wrote about that the rich make offerings to her, but the poor eat it because, they have nothing. And she also is compassionate to those who are less fortunate. At the crossroads, murders would often take place because it's an easy target. You're slowing down to try to figure out which direction to go. Thieves would come out and murder you for your belongings. So the spirit of that past person who had been murdered would sit at the crossroads. So they also consider that sacred to Hecate as a spiritual crossing as well. One of the ways that you would tell if a spirit was there or not was dogs would howl, the area would be cold, you'd get an overwhelming feeling of sadness. That's often linked to spirits who have unfinished business on this earthly plane. You'd feel all three of those things. And that's just also my personal experience. Those are markers that I use if somebody tells me, oh, this place is haunted. I would search those things out and see for myself if there is that vibe there. Hecate is also great for people that have taken their own life, suicide. I feel when you have so much overwhelming want to take your own life, and you actually do, there's unfinished business that you've left because you've gone too early. She is the master of untimely death. Not just suicides, but, you know, car accidents, trauma, death in the hospital. She loves to walk through those places. So, to use her in the necromantic way of communicating with a spirit who has had its life taken too early, who may not understand it's dead, or that may be wandering still, this is the perfect time to call on Hecate to move that spirit forward, because there's still an attachment here that is unfinished. Spirits that have unfinished business, you can put in places to haunt. She is used for either taking spirits out of a place such as that, or putting them in there to haunt. So that's another aspect of working with Hecate. If you wanted to put a spirit in there or take one out, you know, maybe your grandma's house is haunted and you're not sure how to go about getting the spirit out, you would call in Hecate, because she, in the Greek magical poetry, they have reference to her with golden sandals and her noose or rope that she would lasso around a spirit and pull either out of the body or out of places that they have been wandering too often and need to either go back to the Elysian fields or to Hades for him to judge. Or serve their time in the underworld. So, okay, I mentioned the sacrifices, I mentioned the dogs, I mentioned the offerings, the peridepnon. Other aspects of Hecate and working with the dead. She's often linked with, like, Chthoniya, the earth, Urania, so anytime you have, like, pilots that have crashed, or you can, bodies haven't been found, I could definitely see using her for that aspect. And for, Anolia, death at sea, huge thing during the Greek time period. You'd be lost at sea and nobody knows where you were because you're out in the middle of the ocean and happen to, you know, sink. Deaths of the underworld or underwater, she is linked to that, so you'd use her for that purpose. Again, ancestor worship, because she's linked to the family. As a matter of fact, they would often not just use the dipnon at the crossroads, but they'd offer it outside of their own home. They'd have like a little tiny altar that they would, you know, put libations or hang a wreath to Hecate. She was often seen in the temple of Athena and Apollo with wreaths and her own personal stone that they would dedicate to Hecate because she was linked to those deities. And of course, Artemis, because they associated with Hecate is the Kur, the maiden form, and with the Luna, the moon. So, right. In a lot of different cultures, they would see spirits as either menacing or helpful. I also think they could be either. Sometimes there are non-human spirits. Of course, Hecate works with them too. Elementals or beings that are helpful that maybe you don't want to personally go forward with, but have like an intermediary being. Hecate's great for working with them, like demons or angels, demons, because back then they are spirits that have specific work that people do not favor, but they're here for a reason and a purpose, because it's all karma being fulfilled. For example, you know, you may feel like, oh, I'm being attacked, or I'm having nightmares, or you know, this dark entity won't leave my home and I don't understand why. Well, it could be there for a reason, because in the past you could have been abusing a spirit and using it for your own personal gain, like King Solomon. So, you know, that cycle needs to play out. So you're being haunted yourself or being attacked and you don't understand why, and you're trying to get rid of this entity. Well, if you call Hecate in as the mediary, she'll sit there and go, okay, well, you have some stuff coming to you, so things do need to play out, but yes, I will take this being out of your hands. So she may remove the entity, but, you know, then the foundation of your house crumbles, or your pipes burst or something. So it's paid back a little bit, but, you know, the work's still there. These are just ideas and things that I've read about from ancient times. There's this little tale from Pliny the Young during 500 AD where he mentions living in Athens and a spirit haunting the place he was renting from this owner, and the owner had experienced the entity that would show up and rattle chains. Chains are considered part of karma. You know, you're linked together with work that you've done throughout each lifetime that either binds you further to the earth, or you release the link by the spiritual work that we do as witches, and lessen a little bit of that debt here on earth. So he moved his writing desk into the room that the owner said that they kept seeing this corporeal spirit, and he had an encounter with it. It rattled its chains and moaned and wailed at him, and he was smart enough to observe it over a 13-night period, where finally he noticed that it would go out into the garden every night. He followed it out there, and sure enough, there were bones buried underneath there that he unearthed and moved to a better location and honored and gave it offerings, and it no longer haunted the abode. So he himself did a little bit of necromantic work, helping a spirit out, which I think is a beautiful and wonderful thing that if you have the knowledge, you should do. Not necessarily involve yourself in, you know, everybody's business, but if somebody's being haunted or bothered for a reason, either that spirit is coming back to tell you something, either they're unhappy or they have unfinished business that needs to be taken care of. So you having that knowledge, or having a little bit of psychic ability, or knowledge of the metaphysical, or knowledge of the hidden, can help out and move on a spirit, linking also with Hecate, because, you know, she tell you yes or no or what they need, or interact by giving you the blessing of hearing or sight. There are rituals you can do, like in Jack Grail's book, the Hecatean, where you can use sigils and specific herbs and ritual ash over your eyes and body parts to be able to see spirits and communicate with them better. So there are rituals in the Scandinavian tradition by Snorri. Oh my goodness, I forgot his last name. But he wrote staves and sigils that you can use to see spirits. As a matter of fact, I have one of them right here on my leg. That was the stave that you'd write with your own blood on a specific tree to be able to see the spirits wandering the forest. So there are ways to be necromantic and connect yourself with the dead to be able to help them. I always love to talk to Hecate first, or to see what the real issue of the matter is before I move on such things, because like I stated, there are reasons sometimes why people haunt a place, or they have too much want for the living that they attach themselves to people. For example, let's say a young girl committed suicide and she wanted desperately to be loved by her family who didn't like her. She might attach herself to another family that had a girl around that age to live and feed off of that family. You know, you can interfere in that way. Well, not interfere, but with the right respect, move that spirit on, because it's not healthy for it to attach itself to the living, wanting something they can't have. And it's better for them to reincarnate so they can have that experience rather than living in that in-between world. So, yeah, often writings dictate that a spirit will either haunt a person, a location, or an object. Like, example, a young girl loved her jewelry box, so after her death, she might have died young. That wanting, that feeling for that object may stick around it, or that residue of that want is attached to that object, so the next person that gets it may have all those deep feelings of want and attachment that spirit put onto it. Locations, like I stated, haunted houses, or there's also what is considered an echo. For example, Gettysburg. You have the battlefield that people often see the soldiers fighting, and it's just replaying a part of time. That's what they're seeing, the death of these soldiers. Their bodies are probably still somewhere in the battleground that nobody picked up, and they're replaying that same part. They can't interact with anybody. They're not intelligent spirits, but they're an echo of what happened at that location. And of course I mentioned personal hauntings where and the spirit would attach itself to living and go over. Now, as far as possessions go, my personal belief, and I could be wrong, but this is what I've experienced, possessions usually don't happen unless in one of your past lives you have abused a spirit and it is coming back to physically take over you to put its will out there. For example, let's say I practiced Santeria in a past life. I bottled a spirit and I kept it in the jar and I sent it out to go do my bidding without its permission. I'm going to eventually have to repay that debt of its work. So I may be, 20 lifetimes past I'm a little girl and I have no idea what's going on, but my body's being possessed. That's retribution. That is the spirit coming back after a couple past lifetimes and using you. Or maybe not that specific spirit, but another entity. So those are things to be aware of. Try not to, just try to be aware of what energy you're putting out there, because it does come back on you in one form or another. So yeah, that's pretty much what I gotta say. Hopefully you got some better ideas about how to work with Hecate and spirits of the dead, and I gave you a little bit of history out there. I hope this video finds you well and gives you some inspiration. Have a wonderful Halloween and All Saints Day. I'll see you guys probably next month. Bye-bye. Hello, Hecate devotees, fellow witches and occultists alike out there. Today's video is how to have some protection, some stress relief, and some other things to focus on during the pandemic. I'll share a personal story of mine at the end of the video, but for right now, let's focus on the tips that you can use during this crazy time. Right now, everybody is wearing masks to keep safe, to protect them from spittle or coughing or anything else coming upon them. So, everybody's wearing a mask. So one of the tips that I suggest is, because everybody is stressed out there, you're dealing with people of all sorts that are irritating the crap out of you, a couple drops of lavender oil or myrrh on your mask, so when you're breathing it in, it gives you calm while you're out and about. The other suggestion is putting a sigil of protection for health on the inside of your mask. This is my personal sigil that I have, a stave, a key, if you will. This is for Hecate Luna, who deals with disease, curing of disease, and protection and safety. So that's a suggestion. On the inside, I painted it. You could do that. If you're wearing one of the flimsy throwaway masks, you can always use a felt tip marker on the inside and use whatever protection work you want on the inside. That's just one way to keep you safe and calm while you're out there. The second thing would be in your hand sanitizer, using frankincense, myrrh, or rose, or even lavender. All those things are calming, antibacterial, that will help, and also protection oils that are out there. You can also put those in hand sanitizers as well. Just an extra precaution to keep you mentally safe and physically safe while you're out there. A lot of people out there are getting stressed and feeling crazy right now. So a suggestion would be to take a nice stress relieving cleansing bath, using any type of non-iodized salt. Sea salt, Himalayan salt works really good. Making yourself a sachet, by doing that you can get a coffee filter and staple it together after you put the herbs in. You could do rosemary and basil. Those are great for protection, for strength, for calming. You could do cinnamon and cloves in a sachet for keeping the inner anger and frustrations down. You can use lavender and rose for a little self-love to make you feel less stressed out there. And personally, every time that I burn offerings of flowers to Hecate, I save the ash, as well as if I'm doing a serious ritual that is for, strength or protection of myself, I also save the ash. You can put like a pinch of that in your bath, and that renews and protects you with your own magic that you've had sitting around. Another thing that you can do for calming and stress relief would be making yourself a calming tea in the morning. Everybody normally uses chamomile for that, but for me personally, I use 2 teaspoons of turmeric, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, and 1 teaspoon of ginger. That not only helps the blood flow, producing all the good antibodies, but it's also anti-inflammatory and well, I won't say biotic, but it does help promote your body, and it's an antidepressant. Those things help bring you back to life and feel a little bit renewed. So that's always something great to have during this time that's stressful and depressing for everybody. Another thing is, while you're walking out and about, I know there's a lot of areas out there that are not great to walk in. Protection is a huge thing right now because everybody is a little stressed, frustrated. There's crazy crap happening all over the world in different parts of our country, in the US where I'm at. Particularly there's cities that are really dangerous to walk in. And for a little extra protection while you're out and about, you can write a safety sigil or a protection stave and slip it into your shoe, like at the, excuse me, right in there, and so your foot's constantly touching it. Not only a protection one, but there are staves and keys out there for invisibility that might also help you during this time where you want to kind of keep yourself safe and not visible or a problem being attracted to you while you're out in public. Like I said, during walking in those particular dangerous areas, that might help. Those are just some tips and suggestions that I can offer you while you're trying to make it through this crazy, crazy time. I would like to also share a personal story of mine. During this pandemic, a friend of mine's mother got very sick, and she was tested positive for the virus. So what I did to help her, these are the steps that I took. Knowing a little bit of science helps your magic that much more, because when you know how something works, you can cognitively break it down and try to attack the problem at that source. I know medically that contracting the virus, it acts kind of like pneumonia, and it sits fluid on your lungs. So what I did was I took a shot glass. As a matter of fact, I'll show you. This one is in the shape of a female. Because it was a mother, it worked really well. You could take a regular shot glass and put the person's picture behind it, paper clip it, or tie it with some pretty ribbon, whatever color you desire. Fill the glass, your shot glass, with spring water, rain water, snow water, moon water, any type of water that's renewing and helpful and healing. Then I took a handful of rose petals because it means love. I wrote a protection of sigil on one of the rose petals. I put that into the shot glass along with some snake skin. You can, if you don't have snake skin, you could use lizard skin, anything that is regenerative skin properties, which is why I chose snake skin, because they shed and regrow, and the whole point was to help the lungs fight and get back into health. Like I said, the rose petals are for love, and you're writing protection of love on them, and you're putting them all into the glass with their picture on the back, and you're signifying love and strength and healing. And then what I did was I took a candle, I wrote their initials on it, I anointed it with frankincense, because frankincense is for protection as well as healing. And then I lit it next to the shot glass, and I let that burn its course. As the water in the shot glass evaporates, and you say a prayer of healing over everything while you light the candle, little by little, the shot glass represents their body, and it pulls the moisture out from the lungs as the water evaporates. This worked personally for the person. A little by little, every day they got better. The fluid started to clear out, and they recovered after 2 weeks. Now, I didn't add any more current water to it. I just let it do its thing till it completely evaporated down. And I did do the candle process 2 times during that time, so that it helped regenerate everything and keep them on my mind and in my magic process. I hope maybe that works for you as well. I know it worked personally for the person I was doing that for. Everybody's magic is a little bit different, and everybody has a little bit of different ways of doing things. But like I said, this is just my personal magic. This is what worked for me. If it helps you in any way, if it gives you an idea of something to do, please take it, use it to your advantage. That's exactly what these videos are for, is for giving you a little bit of an idea and hopefully spark some interest or inspiration within you. I hope that you're all healthy and well out there. It is madness out there, not just the pandemic, but 2020 has been crazy for everybody. And keep you all in my heart, my mind, and I hope you're all doing well. Blessed be.
Wetun prunus terranis et calestis bomo Hecate. De que sumo latus viet coderum, que iu iptilia dot nox. Lampas manas stilis et dies, amicus cotor glory calica, gregene que zucta caras cresta potus, Hecate cusitis iscure, que fenedo formudo terra mola pactus. Gorgo, mormo, non peramere utus, Iaco paspera cuda super militia traficum. Glory de dom inferi, in terra vita omnibus fortibus, laudamus te benedictus te, odorumus te glorificamos te, gratias amagas te me propter mandam potendum taum. O Hecate, regine per omnor potens, vos igiors, vos iscaleste, vos Mary, vos nefonde, vos sepulchri, ego regnum cornibus atris amor, o Hecate lucifera, ego regnum cornibus atris amor. Hecate the beauteous, you I invoke, you rose and crossroads, of heaven, earth, and sea as well, you the saffron clad amongst the tombs, dancing with the dead souls that ponder bright. You, daughter of Perseus, taking joy in deer and dogs in the night. You, who devour those whose grave are untimely, and you who make sacrifice, come to me, goddess, come to me now, in the night. Come on to me, O Hecate, terrible-hearted mistress of the night. O you, Hecate, queen of impermanence, key bearer of the 7 veils, annihilator of fear, terror, and the reason for suffering. Come, Catonia, lover of loneliness, Bacchus, queen and widow of grief. Here our love for you, giant mistress of the void, giver of life and strength and freedom. You are the mother of pain, suffering, loss, and separation. O great and Hecate Catonia, your form is trauma and crime. Cemeteries, hospitals, and haunted houses are in desolate deserts at your altars. You are Hades' priestess and born the highest awareness. Keeper of the dead untimely, you ruled the coldest place in hell and feast on rotting flesh. O Hecate, crone of untimely death, arms entangled with snakes, you are the ultimate raging sea of consciousness. Your skin is cold as ice and mist for breath. You shrink through the night. Phantoms and ghosts are your company. You, goddess of the triple forked road, be here tonight amongst us. I invoke you, Hecate Catonia. Rexaton hepaton pore pegnux. Mascali mascala ponum kindobayat. Oreo bazakra. Rexaton hepaton pore pegnux. Mascali mascala ponum kindobayat. Oreo bazakra. Rexaton hepaton pore pegnux. Askikataski, Eran Orion, Ir Megasam near Power Antism. Porbor, Ponrorba, Sunataya, Maltayaya, Nupuporaya, Porbabor, Panorba, Sunataya, Maltayaya, Nupuporaya, Porbabor, Panorba, Sunataya, Maltayaya, Nupuporaya. fatum de gorgo, laro sacrayo. O Hecate de Hecate calaga Hecate trium, de fatum de gorgo, laro sacrayo. O Hecate de Hecate calaga Hecate trium, de fatum de gorgo, laro sacrayo. Luca ferroria, Hecate trinifica, porca fortuna, Hecate nauta 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 Luca ferroria, Hecate trinifica, porca fortuna. fa'la down. Ego Hecate buko fa'la down. Ego Hecate buko fa'la